So, thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the Q4 holiday season in general within an e-commerce context. Um, we're going to talk today about some themes, including price and promotion, and the role of data science and artificial intelligence in your e-commerce setups for the holidays. And we're joined today by Ralph Meyer. He's a product manager with a specialization in pricing technology, pricing insights, dynamic repricing, pricing strategy. So thank you, Ralph, for joining us.
Thanks
Um,
for having me.
Absolutely. We're also joined today by Stefan Stopper. Stefan is a client lead working with some of our largest clients on their strategy, their channel strategy, how they approach their marketing mix, allocating budget, what kind of projects they work on. Thanks for joining us, Stefan.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we're joined by Catherine Monroe. Catherine is a data scientist with a specialization in natural language processing. And Catherine's been quite busy lately on a variety of projects, including editing a textbook, a data science handbook, um, a LinkedIn learning course, also as a TEDx moderator, and finally, she's super active in the women in AI community. So thanks, Catherine, for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So getting into today's topic, Stefan, I want to start with you. Google's motto for this holiday season is capture the comeback. They're referring here to a return of in-person celebrations and also in-store shopping to prepare for those celebrations. So Stefan, what do you think are the implications of that return that Google's expecting, that return to stores and offline activity for e-commerce brands and retailers?
Yeah, what I've seen is that many people did their forecasting based on the numbers of last year, and last year, as everyone knows, was a really special year. There was a almost 100% shift towards online, and what we see this year is that there's of course a natural shift again to shopping in store. And keeping exactly this in mind is crucial. And I know it's tough to predict because no one really knows how to forecast online and offline sales right now. And that's the biggest challenge I see currently with many of our clients or my clients. And what's important there is don't only look at 2020 numbers, look at 2019 as well, how it was before COVID, and expect that this year's sales will be strong again online, but offline as well. So there will be people who bought naturally offline in 2019, learned how it works online during the whole COVID situation, and still might stick to online, which means offline will be back, of course, but online should be definitely bigger than it was 2019. But it's crucial that you don't only forecast for online sales, but offline sales as well. And yeah, what's important from a Google or advertising perspective, of course, is that you have the basics in place. Google is offering some campaign types that really drive offline sales as well, like local campaigns, local inventory ads on Google Shopping. And you should make sure to really focus on what's important to you. If you think offline sales are more important because conversion rates are higher when people go offline in store, try to shift people towards your offline business. If not, stick to online. But as we know, it's about supply chain as well, and that might be a challenge for all the retailers right now. But make sure that you, yeah, plan accordingly and try to shift people where you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great advice, Stefan. I agree. There's this major kind of comparison challenge occurring right now where we've seen this huge fluctuation in 2020, and we'll see another kind of fluctuation to be determined in 2021. One thing that comes to mind for me too is that there could be a value in kind of zooming in as well to looking at those core days, Black Friday through Cyber Monday, and looking at hourly trends in the past years as well. So not just thinking about, okay, what's the overall volume going to be like, but what kind of trends are surfacing intraday on those key days as well.
Definitely, totally.
But Ralph, I have a question for you because when we just talk about Black Friday, some economists have been pretty critical of the event. They argue that it just serves to take existing demand and consolidate that into a time range rather than creating new demand, and that this time range, there's steep discounting occurring, and this become expected by consumers. And there are also Stefan just hinted at as well, some logistical challenges arising, which can further damage profits due to just that crunch that occurs. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think it nicely ties back also to what Stefan just said, where it's really hard to predict what demand is actually going to look like across your various channels. Like given the pre-COVID, post-COVID situation, are you expecting like the same demand overall, and it's just going to shift from online to offline to online, or vice versa? Or do you actually expect an increase in demand overall? And you can ask the same question with Black Friday. Like, does all this deep discounting and that, crazy promotions that are going on, does that actually create new original demand? Or is it just shifting demand around either in time? Like, do people deliberately delay a purchase from the summertime towards the fall because they're expecting these deep discounts? But would they have bought, the new TV set anyway? Or is it just shifting demand around either from one channel to another or from one merchant to another? Like if you take examples from really different industries, and you look at consumer packaged goods, there the demand is relatively stable regardless to what you do with discounting, right? People are gonna not buy 10 times as much bread as they do if you drop the price of bread by 90%, right? Whereas if you drop the price of a flat screen TV by 90%, you're definitely gonna see an increased demand overall. And so that really ties back to what Stefan said. You have to be strategic about your thinking about what you want to do as a retailer, and whether or not you think you can actually create demand by doing those discountings. Or
Mhm.
if not, if you know that there's relatively stable overall demand in your market, then the question is, then your strategy really has to look at how can I fulfill some of the demands that otherwise my competitors would be fulfilling. So how can I just gain market share in a market that's relatively flat if I'm convinced that I'm not going to be able to create new original demand?
Mhm.
So yes, definitely a strategic topic to look at depending on your industry, your vertical, and the kind of customers you expect to be seeing.
Mhm. Yeah, the way that elasticity will behave is going to be different there. I mean, I think one thing that's been happening of interest in recent years with Black Friday is that Um, we've seen the search interest beginning earlier every year, and so it's maybe not such an acute peak as it used to be in the past, but perhaps starting to flatten out a bit. I mean, I believe Google even suggested that there's a growing share of shoppers who, rather than Black Friday being the kickoff event for their holiday season, it's really kind of the end of their shopping. They've been already browsing and building carts, and yeah, and then it's this kind of checkout event for them, which is quite interesting too. Um, but back to this topic of fulfillment and crunch, Stefan, regarding that logistical challenge around Black Friday, Cyber Monday at this time of year, we know that just globally there's quite a stress on supply chains. The price of shipping containers is just skyrocketing. Um, and people are already talking about Shipageddon, which I think was first trending last year. That kind of hashtag Shipageddon. What actions can marketing teams take to ease that dilemma and support a good customer experience in the face of those challenges?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen that last year as well. It started, yeah, during COVID, but got worse during Black Friday because it was not only Black Friday, it was that Amazon shifted Prime Day towards
Mm,
Q4, and then we really have seen longer delivery times. And as you've said, the price of shipping containers really skyrocketed this year, along with transit times. And UPS mentioned that they won't be able to ship all the packages they have to ship during peak season. But as far as I know, they even said that they're gonna stock or increase the limits of possibilities they have right now. But from a marketing perspective, I think it's crucial to be transparent. We've seen that last year when people put banner on the website saying that delivery times will be longer, or even from a really Google Ads perspective, adjusting delivery times in Google Shopping or communicating the issue in Google Ads. Because I think people will be thankful for your transparency instead of just saying delivery time 1-2 days and then you receive your package in a week or two. Because I think if you're transparent, people will accept it, people will understand it. But if you encounter issues and it really takes way longer to deliver, you will
mm,
get lots of bad reviews. And you know that bad reviews really mean bad
yeah,
reputation. And you should really focus on transparency, honesty, I think that's key from a marketing perspective to overcome this challenge.
Hmm. Yeah, so getting that messaging out there and as much information as possible so you can qualify the customer and they can kind of in qualify or out qualify based on those criteria that you give them. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to go forward. And Catherine, I want to bring you in here regarding data science. What do you see as the biggest opportunities in e-commerce pertaining to machine learning and data science and the technologies that are available to us these days?
Yeah, thanks for the really interesting question, Mike. It's a lot of fun for me to answer because this is such an exciting area. So I will start though with a little bit of a caveat, which is that machine learning projects and big data science projects, they take a lot of time to develop if you do want to do them right. And of course, you do want to do them right. So my advice is to start with the low-hanging fruit now. And what that looks like depends on every different listener who's listening right now. It depends on how much of a data science team you have, how mature your data systems are, and so on. But choose something that's low hanging for you, but at the same time, make sure that you are capturing high quality data as high as possible so that you can start thinking about more ambitious projects in 2022. And now to actually answer your question with some examples. So in data science, there's a lot of use cases. For example, getting better retail insights, like being able to segment your customers on a more granular level and understand them better, or using basket insights to understand what customers are really buying, not just what they're clicking, but what actually ends up in their basket that they buy at the very end. This is a very, very useful avenue to pursue. And then if you want to bring machine learning into it, you can be thinking about bidding automation, especially that which considers seasonality. It's really, really important that if you are automating, that you are reacting to trends and things, especially in this changing time. You want to be able to more accurately predict demand and price elasticity, which ties to what, for example, Ralph was talking about. And another project you could be thinking about, it's a little bit of something that could be considered later because it won't be so relevant straight away this year, and this is customer lifetime value forecasting. The reason I say it might not be so relevant for the end of this year if you start on something like this is that the way shoppers are behaving in this part of the year is going to be different to their normal behavior. So it's more something that you can think about for the future. And finally, because my domain is natural language processing, this is what really excites me. And there are things you can do even in the short term. So I would suggest focusing on improving service in what is definitely a stressful time for consumers. So if you have reviews and things like this or consumer inquiries, if you do collect that information, it's not so difficult to perform some basic topic modeling or clustering to find out what people are talking about, what they're asking for, what their key pain points are, and then maybe set in place some basic ways to handle that. You won't be able to deal with every situation, but if you can identify a couple of things that are really causing issues for your consumers and make even some rule-based processes to assess that, this is something you can really think about before the end of this year. And then later, you can consider more complex projects, like if you do want to have an assistive chatbot on your website, or if you do want to improve search with semantic search, or maybe even doing some social media listening by crawling information from Twitter and seeing what people are saying, predicting trending products. All of this you can do later on.
Thanks for sharing those ideas, Catherine. Yeah, I think that's a really key message that these projects are not lightly undertaken. And I mean, generally, when it comes to Black Friday, you want to think about what can I do now that's going to be impactful, but not too disruptive, because you need to have everything kind of nailed down and smoothly operating in time. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing that can be done. And on this topic of data, I want to just jump back to you for a minute, Ralph. You've talked a lot about data-driven pricing, from competition-based to demand-based, these different strategies. So how can merchants decide which strategy is right for them in a holiday period?
Yeah, that's another great question, Mike. It ties back to a couple of things that we already heard today. So the first and most important thing when it comes to data-driven pricing, obviously, is what Catherine just said. You need to have access to that high-quality data that you can then use either manually in the first place, or in a semi-automated way, in a rule-based way, or later on in a machine learning model to do actual predictive pricing, for example. So there are very sophisticated models out there that would help you, for example, to use machine learning to predict consumer behavior, predict what demand is going to be, and thereby predict probably also what your competition is up to. And as a combination of all of that, predict what your ideal price point at every given point in time for every given product would be. However, that sounds like science fiction to many of the retailers that are out there at the moment, and they're probably struggling even with simpler or more manual processes and strategies, right? And so I don't want to take it to the technical level too much, but I really want to advise retailers to take a step back and consider what it actually is that you want to achieve from a business point of view, and then put pricing in there as sort of one component to your overall business strategy. And to give an example for that, if you are, for example, a venture-backed startup, then your business objective will be focused very much around growth and customer acquisition. Your focus will not be so much around profitability and sustainability in the first, say, 1.5 years or something, but you really want to build that customer base. Now, if you're an established retailer who's been out there for 20, 30 years, you're financed from cash flow, and you're just looking to build a sustainable business in the long run, then you might be looking much more at how can I best serve the existing customers that I have? How can I increase loyalty? How can I increase customer retention? And not being so aggressive in terms of pricing and competitiveness, for example. So these things need to be tightly connected with your overall business strategy that has to pay into some let's say higher order business objective that you wanna achieve. And that's where it's very hard to figure out a sort of one size fits all pricing strategy that would work for any retailer, particularly given the different aspects now with seasonalities and with COVID and with a lot more unpredictability coming in as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Ralph, and it's one of my favorite topics. There is so much venture capital, private equity flowing into e-commerce right now. Also, a lot of acquisitions and roll-ups occurring, and yeah, definitely there are some aggressive players out there, and super important to be aware of. And Stefan, if we take this to kind of into the Google Ads environment, suppose someone is just getting started with price-based marketing. What are some initial approaches that merchants can take to this topic in a promotional strategy for Black Friday, for example? What possibilities are there?
Yeah, as Ralph said, there are many possibilities if you have the right tools in place. But as he said as well, for most of the retailers, that's not the case right now. They're just starting with it, and there's a possibility within Google Merchant Center where you just look at price competitiveness data. That's definitely a starting point. And what you could do is that you look at your top selling products, increase traffic, and just check with the help of Google Merchant Center, are you price competitive or not? And based on this, you can even create a new structure within your account. You give those products more budget, you bid them more aggressively because you see they are competitive when it comes to pricing. There's a lot of volume on it. So that's something they could definitely do. But what I think is super important this year is we've talked about supply chain earlier, and we've talked about increased costs when it comes to supply chain. And what's expected this year is that big brands and retailers give less discount this year because they somehow have to cope with this increased supply chain costs, which means, and what I've seen last years is that some brands and retailers just said 20% on everything, just because it made sense to them. But this year, it's even more important to watch competitors, because if they are not discounting that heavily, you could over discount, which means you're killing margin you don't have to kill. So merchant center data is a good starting point. But if possible, I would really suggest to look at repricing or dynamic pricing tools to give you the insights on several platforms. Like Google Shopping price data is one part, but of course, people price differently if it's Google Shopping, Idealo, if it's Amazon, for example. And you need to make sure to really look at your competitors, because I expect that discounting behavior will change. I guess normal people, so the people buying online, they won't really see a difference because they see minus 30%. But I guess that the basis from which they calculate the discount will be a bit differently. So I really advise every retailer to look at competitor data and not over discount stuff to kill the whole margin.
Yeah, those are really interesting points that you brought up, Stefan. I think generally there's kind of a challenge in place here to Black Friday as a concept. I mean, well, if we just take a bigger picture for a second, over time, um, there's been a long historical trend that purchasing power online has increased relative to purchasing power offline because of the price comparison possibilities when you're shopping online. And it was really around the time we were coming out of lockdowns for the first time in summer of 2020 that that balance started shifting, and we started seeing like a negative growth in online purchasing power. So I think that that was when a lot of merchants had to make up for things that occurred in the course of the pandemic to their business models, and um, these strains have just gotten greater. So it'll be really interesting to see how big the discounting really is, and if it's not as strong as in the past, how consumers respond to this. Um, you know, I'll take that back to you, Catherine, because pricing is often considered a key driver of click-through rate in advertising, particularly in Google Shopping, which is kind of like this digital shelf embedded into your search results. But it's not the only one. So, what's your take on the significance of product titles in relation to ad clicks?
Mhm. Well, this is something we've done a lot of research on here. For example, we've looked at characteristics of well-performing titles versus well-performing products versus poor-performing products. What characteristics were present or absent in those titles? We've tried to map this in terms of statistical relation to things like click-through rate, and we've done a lot of controlled A/B testing as well when we make a change to a title and measure the significance of the effect of that. And the results have always been clear that these things do make a big difference, but it actually varies per client and per vertical in terms of the effect. So you might think that always adding the merchant store name to the title would be a boost, but not necessarily. For some, definitely. For others, not so useful. There are some common rules that do seem to apply generally. So, often including a brand is a good thing, which would make sense. But again, it's never 100%. So you really do need to experiment and make sure that your testing is accurate and is rigorously set up and so on. And the same even applies if you want to extend this to things like microcopy, which is something that's overlooked, but it's really important. The purpose of microcopy is this is the little textual details that you get on, say, a website, and it's there to help consumers get clarity on something, to reassure them, say, in the purchase process, and often also to call them to action as well. So obviously, these things are essential for winning a conversion. And so what you can do is, again, test rigorously when you make changes to your website. So for example, if you have a sign up now button that just says sign up now, the consumer doesn't necessarily know what to expect. Are they going to have to add credit card numbers? Are they going to have to fill out a long form or something like this? And so if you add little details that tell them what to expect, this really reassures them. Or maybe you go the other way around. You do have some microcopy, like some terms and conditions, but it's too long. Nobody would ever read it. So try making a little bit shorter, more snappy, and maybe even ensure that your microcopy reflects your brand voice. So it shouldn't be just dry terms and conditions. It should actually sound like you. And then make sure that you're testing that properly, because all of these can have a big impact in pushing somebody through to a sale that they're also really happy with, that they will recommend to others, and so on.
Yeah, so definitely that test and learn mindset, and similar to what Stefan was saying earlier, having really kind of a open and on-brand communication. I've also got a related question. Um, Getting back to this topic, for example, of online shopping being used often for price comparison, Google has research suggesting that this has gotten a lot more complicated over the last years, that a primary function or behavior was price comparison, and that now people, instead of looking for cheapest TV, for example, they're looking for best TV, which is something that is less objectively quantifiable. It's much more subjective in the eye of the beholder. There's so many dimensions. What could best mean? And they talk about this as being emblematic of this move toward like the messy middle, where they say, yeah, the customer journey is getting so much more complex. And there is also an overload of choices and options for consumers as well, on the other hand. And so we fall back on different kind of cognitive shortcuts to try to make sense of this. It's not just, it's a messy middle for us as consumers. It's messy for for the businesses advertising those consumers. But to tie it back to this idea of like micro copy, for example, they talk about category heuristics as being a key concept in making purchasing decisions. Could you maybe explain that concept to us a little bit? What should we be aware of there?
Yeah, absolutely. This was fascinating research. So the idea of the messy middle, as you know, is that between the trigger of I need to buy something and then the final purchase, consumers are looping around between exploring different options and then evaluating which different options suit them best. And what Google did was they looked at some behavioral science to determine different biases which can affect the likelihood of a conversion. And to start with obvious examples, just to give our listeners some context, this is things like the power of free. If you offer something for free, of course, this is going to nudge consumers. Or if you have social proof, like in the form of reviews, this will nudge them as well. And what the category heuristics are the kinds of information that we expect when we are comparing items in a category. So I was recently in the market for a camera. So of course, I'm looking to compare specific technical details like the number of megapixels or the sensor size. And Amazon does this really well by having this table of related products for you to compare at the bottom of the page. And obviously, this is really helpful for me in choosing which item I want to buy. And I have experienced it that I've been on websites where this information is missing. And so what have I done? I've sought out the same product on a different website and bought it there, because at least there I know what I'm getting and I know that it has the characteristics that I want. So it's really crucial that retailers put the effort of into adding this information to the website. It might be a lot of work, but I think it'll not only be worth it in terms of getting that conversion then, but I've got to bring it back to data, of course. If you keep this information in a structured way, which presumably you will, because if you're going to add this to your website, then you must have it somewhere. This information is gold for data science. So for example, you can do product clustering and use that to make recommendations. Or you can even think about generating ad copy and product copy automatically, or using this for text ad automation. So it's really worth it to include these category heuristics in many different ways.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the value of that. I think it's so important. There's so many use cases and benefits for the customer, which will of course benefit your conversion rate or match rate, and benefits for the company too. Um, I kind of want to wrap it up with a question for all of you. Maybe Ralph, we'll start with you. Um, what's a key action you think that e-commerce and digital marketing teams should be taking right now to get ready for the holiday peak?
Yeah, that's a great question given the time of the year that we're already in, right?
Yeah.
And I think my answer has to be twofold after what we discussed today. I think the first advice that is very much in line with what Catherine just talked about is, if you're not doing it already, then make sure that you're collecting as much data as you possibly can, within reason, of course, about customer journeys, about your products, about competition, to make sure that you build out this solid base of data that you can later, for example, train machine learning models on, or just do simple statistical research or even anecdotal research and look at which products were bought most frequently, on Black Friday in the morning versus in the afternoon. So start collecting all the data that you can if you're not doing that right now, knowing that you will need that data at some point later on, and that it's going to be gold, as Catherine said. And the second, probably more tactical thing that might even help you for this holiday season is to take a moment to reconsider what, as a retailer, as a brand, what's your competitive advantage? Where do you think is your strong point? Is it in fulfillment? Is it in price? Is it in customer service? Where is actually your differentiation to your competition? And then try to shape a marketing and pricing and product strategy for the holiday season that fits to that. So if you're strong on price because you have, for example, because you're buying in bulk and you get good prices from your wholesaler, make use of that. If you don't have that strength, then probably going for price competitiveness is not that great of an idea. Maybe you should focus more on retention, loyalty, things like that. So really looking at taking this more strategic view of your business and looking at where are your strengths and how can you leverage them, as to not fight any battles that you're not going to win anyway. That would be my tactical advice for not only this holiday season but in general.
Well, thanks for sharing that advice, Ralph. And Stefan, can I ask you the same question? What's a key action you think that e-commerce and digital marketing teams should be taking right now to prepare for Black Friday?
Fully agree with what Ralph said about data, but not. So I'm focusing on marketing data right now. So what I'm thinking of, we should make use of the data we can get, because during Black Friday, it's increased overall traffic, increased buyers, even new clients, new customers are on your website. And you should make sure that you have tracking set up correctly. You should gather them in remarketing lists and use them over and over again, but not only marketing when it comes to, I don't know, banners or videos, but you should make sure that you use the data you get in the best possible way with, email marketing automation and stuff like this. And you should make sure to prepare your sellers for the sale that's coming up. So for example, 1 week prior Black Friday, or 2 weeks even, put a banner on the website and say biggest sale coming up, whatever, and let people register via email, which means all new clients, new customers coming to the website and seeing this banner will, and if they're willing to buy anyways, will sign up for this. And you,
Mhm.
even if they're not buying at the end, because maybe there's a competitor having better prices or stuff like this, you have the data, you have the email addresses, and you can remarket them with emails and banners and whatsoever. So make sure to prepare your website from a data perspective to use it afterwards. But also when it comes to your servers, make sure your servers are able to stand the increased traffic. I've seen a couple of clients last year who had some issues with their servers and were not able to be fully up and running 24/7 during Black Friday week. So make sure your servers are able to do that. And on the other hand, plan your stock levels best possible way. So make sure to find out what's going to be a huge bestseller this year, and make sure that your stock levels are ready for that. Because one of the most annoying things for customers is if there are too many stockouts, or just sizes that no one most of the people don't really need, like XXL or something like this. So
Mhm.
make sure products are available. And the sizes topic is an important one as well, because if you're advertising on, I don't know, Google Shopping, and you only have XXXL or something in stock, and you still advertise it and waste hundreds of euros and no one really buys, it's a major issue, and you could spend your marketing budget in a better way. So that's the kind of advice I would give to retailers.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that idea of thinking about retention from the start, kind of unifying this acquisition and retention topic so that it's customer capture. There'll be this volume. Let's capture that volume. So it's not just one and done, or, yeah, see you now and never again, but that we can actually, um, build some new volume out of there. I really like that.
And one more thing, Mike,
Sure.
because Catherine, you mentioned that people react to huge offers and stuff like this. So many clients really, or many retailers really focus on performance, lower funnel marketing, Google Shopping, which brings immediate return. But especially Black Friday week is a season where you can, with the right approach in upper funnel, banners that are really designed for conversion, which is really important. People think a banner is a banner, but no, a banner is not a banner. So it
Mm.
comes with the banner design. But it's the season where you can really focus on upper funnel branding, bring new people to the website who are really willing to buy, and the chances of them buying is way bigger than the whole year. It's
Mhm.
it's really the time to not only focus on immediate return, but really bringing new people to the website, showing them your offers, and make them potentially returning visitors. So that's
Mhm.
something people should keep in mind, and really investing some budget in mid and upper funnel measures.
Mhm. So really having that end-to-end strategy across your different channels, definitely. And Catherine, I'll give you the final word. What's a key action you think that e-commerce and digital marketing teams should take now for the holiday season?
Yeah, thank you. It's appropriate, based on what Stefan just said. You mentioned the different channels and getting this bigger overview, and that ties to what I want to say. So we've talked about collecting data, of course, but you have to also make sure that this data is really good quality. And there is a risk that merchants might say, okay, holiday season, I want to really collect data from different sources. The heart's in the right place. They might want to say, try some offline conversion tracking to see what's happening in store, or different things like this. If you are going to do that, that's excellent, but make sure that the quality is good, so that you're attributing sales correctly, you're recording your conversion values correctly, and all of this sort of thing. Because if you are using any machine learning, or you will in the future, then the magnitude of sales that we will get at this time of the year will really skew things if the data is flawed in some way. So that's one point. And then another point is just more general. So as I said, make sure your titles and your copy are top quality. Be intelligent about pricing, and also know what a typical basket looks like for you and your shop, because you can use that information to offer special deals, special combinations and so on. And remember that it's not just about this season, but all the amazing projects that you can start next year.
Awesome. I really like that. I think that's a great note to end on. So I want to thank you, Ralph, Catherine, and Stefan, for a great conversation. And thanks everyone for listening. So we're wishing you the best of success for your Q4 campaigns through the holiday season ahead, and a lot of success into the year beyond that. So thanks again, and take care, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.